Good evening, everyone. Today is September the 13th of 2022. The time is now 6:15 p.m. This is the regular scheduled meeting of the Richland Board of Commissioners. We are housed on tonight at Lower Richland High School in Hopkins, South Carolina. I do have a statement to read that says, pursuant to the Freedom of Information Act, which is FOIA, the public has been provided access to the live stream of this meeting via the district's website, which is www.richland1.org, as well as in person with limited seating. We do have an executive session set before us with an agenda, which is Office of the Board 3.1 Student Tuition Waiver Requests, and then Office of Human Resources, which is 4.1 HR Personnel Updates, 4.2 Administrative Hire, 4.3 Leave of Absence, and 4.4 Hiring of Personnel. What is the pleasure of the board?
Move
Commissioner
for approval
Devine.
to go to executive session to discuss said items.
Okay, it's been moved by Commissioner.
Second.
Devine. It's been moved by Commissioner Devine and second by Commissioner Bishop. We'll open the floor for any question or discussion. Commissioner King?
Yes, Ms. Harris, I was wondering also if we could add to the topics discussed in executive session, any update on the Jewel lawsuit, but it's in the news about the settlement, and maybe that is an item that we can get some information about, even in public session.
Attorney Williams, can you speak in the mic, please?
Yeah, they're gonna turn it.
I am waiting to hear from the attorney, and as soon as I hear from him, I anticipate that I'll be able to present information at the next school board meeting.
Okay, very well. Thank you, Ms.
Okay.
Williams.
All right, any other question or discussion? Seeing none, hearing none, we will call for the vote. We're going to take this manually because Marietta's making some copies. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those that oppose say nay. The ayes have it. We are now going into executive session. Also, let the record reflect that Commissioner Myers has not arrived as of yet. Thank you. We'll now bring our public portion of our meeting to order. Executive session did end at 6:28 p.m. with a motion from Commissioner King. That was seconded by Commissioner Clyburn, and the vote was unanimous to end executive session. We'll now call our meeting to order for our public session, and we'll begin with the invocation being presented on tonight by Commissioner Devine.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Let us bow. As we gather here today as members of the Richland One community, we pray that we're ever mindful of opportunities to render our service to fellow citizens and to this community. Keeping in mind always that enduring values of life, exhorting our efforts in those areas and on those things upon which future generations can build with confidence. Let us continue to strive to make this a better world. We are thankful for this day that you have given us, for its blessings, its opportunities, and its challenges. May we appreciate and use each day that comes to us. We pray for strength and guidance for each day as it comes, for each day's duties, for each day's problems. May we be challenged to give you our best always, and may we be assured of your presence with us. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so very much, Commissioner Devine. We'll now call for the adoption of the agenda. It's the pleasure of the board.
Second.
It's been moved by Commissioner Myers and second by Commissioner Clyburn. We'll now open the floor for any question or discussion. Seeing none, hearing none, we will call for the vote. And Ms. Marietta, we will be electronic, correct? Okay. Let the record reflect the agenda adoption has been approved and the vote is unanimous. We'll now move to our consent agenda. And if there's no objection from the board, we'll read all items in, not unless you have an item you'd like for us to pull. Commissioner Lomanak?
I'd like to pull 7, 3,
7-3.
4, 6, and 7, please.
Okay. Commissioner King?
I'd like to pull, which one didn't you call? 5. I think 5 is, yeah, the Avid, yes.
Okay. Any other commissioner? Okay, without any objection from the board, we'll read in 7-1, which is the minutes, 7-2, which is a contract extension for professional development staff training, 7-8, which is a contract extension for speech and language therapy services. What's the pleasure of the board?
Move for approval.
Second.
It's been moved by Commissioner Bishop, second by Commissioner Devine. We'll now open the floor for any questions or comments. Commissioner King?
Yes, thank you, Ms. Harris. So particularly the speech and language therapy services, does that fall under special ed?
Dr. Brazar?
It does, yes, ma'am.
Okay, all right, so, because we have such a shortage and now we're having to contract outside, of course, and this only gives us about 2.5, right? Just about. Are we, I mean, there are federal requirements associated with that. Are we really able to meet all those mandates?
I spoke with Ms. Dixon just before this meeting to verify that we can cover the needed services with this contract.
With this contract?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Okay, are there any other questions or comments? We'll call for the vote. Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Lomax, you had a question?
Not about that item, sorry.
Okay, we'll call for the vote.
Ms. Harris, Dr. Broussard, that puts us at how many speech
Commissioner
and
King.
language therapies?
Commissioner King?
Yes.
Can you hold 1 second? We're in the process of voting. You hold 1 second until we declare the vote? We had already ended question and comment, so if you give us 1 second. To someone that hasn't voted yet? Okay, the ayes have it, the vote is unanimous. You had a follow-up question, Ms. King?
Yeah, so that puts us, that puts the district at how many?
I'm sorry, I don't have that total
Okay.
number, but I can get that information for you.
Okay, that'd be great, thanks.
Okay, we'll move on now to 7-2, which is the contract extension for professional development, staff training, Ms. Outing. We're at
7.3, Madam Chair.
Yes. 7-3, I'm sorry, which is the professional development staff training.
Madam Chair, members of the board, Dr. Witherspoon, the administration is requesting approval to extend a contract to J Squared MCR LLC to provide professional development staff training. The administration so recommends.
Okay, you've heard the recommendation of the administration. What's the pleasure of the board?
Move for approval.
Second.
Been moved by Commissioner Myers, second by Commissioner Devine. We now open the floor for question or discussion. Commissioner Lomax?
Thank you, Chairwoman Harris. This question is really for this and the next one, 704, I guess. Both of them seem to deal with professional development around SC-ready math testing. Can you explain the difference between the two?
Dr. Hagwood, would you come and explain how those two contracts are different?
Good evening, everyone. Commissioner, the contracts are actually very similar. It's just a matter of neither of the vendors have enough days to provide the support that we need. We allow our schools to sign up for the number of days that they need. Usually it's about the same based on their needs at the school level. And so it's just two people with the same expertise providing similar services.
All right, that's super helpful. Thank you. And then I assume there are also folks in the district that are doing this kind of as part of your day-to-day, not yours, but as part of their day-to-day job throughout the year to work with teachers and conduct professional development. Is that right?
That is correct, yes.
Do we, both of these contracts, I think, are extending them, so we've used both of these companies before. Do we get feedback from the teachers that participated them in the past to just make sure that teachers are getting something out of it and all of that?
Yes, we get feedback from teachers, from school leaders, and we also look at assessment results. We don't do necessarily a particular study on each one, a research study, but we do look at the results of the teachers who've worked most closely with these vendors.
And is there, given the concerns over the last year, I see that we're increasing the amount, a very tiny amount. Is there a need to increase it further, or do you think this is the, I mean, obviously you think this is the right amount because this is what you're asking for. Is that right?
Yes, to be quite honest with you, these are very heavily sought after vendors, and we are grateful and we benefit from the number of days they're able to give us because they work on a national level. And so we have contracted with the number of days they're able to provide us at this time, but we feel like it will meet our needs.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you both. Thank you, Chairman Harris.
Absolutely. Any other questions on 7.3 before we call for the vote? Okay, at this time, we'll call for the vote. 7.3. We need to take it manual. Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those that oppose say nay. Ayes have it. The vote is unanimous. 7.3 has been approved, as previously stated. We're now at 7.4 with the contract extension for professional development and staff training. Even though I know your question has already been answered, I need to read it in. What's the pleasure of the board?
Move for approval.
Second.
It's been moved by Commissioner Myers and second by Commissioner Devine. We'll open the floor for any question or discussion. Seeing none, hearing none, we will call for the vote, and we are voting on 7.4 now.
Manual.
Manual. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those that oppose say aye. Nay. The ayes have it. Vote is unanimous. 7.4 has been approved as previously stated. We'll now move to 7.5, which is the contract extension for Avid Center. Ms. Outing.
Madam Chair, members of the board, Dr. Witherspoon, the administration is requesting approval to extend the contract to Avid Center to provide professional development services. The administration so recommends.
You've heard the recommendation of the administration. What's the pleasure of the board?
Move for approval.
Second.
Been moved by Commissioner Myers, second by Commissioner Clyburn, and second by Commissioner Devine. We'll now open the floor for any question or comment. Commissioner King?
Yes, thank you. So there are essentially 20 schools that have Avid, and I think each year I ask the question, why not more? It's a great program. So that's one question, and then I'll have more.
Dr. Hagwood?
You might want to stay there.
Just to be clear, your question was about increasing the number
Yes,
of
so,
schools?
right.
We do not have any plans to increase the number of schools this year.
How come?
That is not, to be honest with you, that wasn't something that we considered this year. Of course, we always take a look at the services that are being provided to each school and at the end of or during the course of every year, but we just did not decide to expand it this year because of the funding mechanism that we have.
But we love it, right? Don't we
Yes.
like Avid?
We do,
We do.
yes.
And it's mostly in schools that are designated Title I schools, right?
Currently, yes,
So this is paid for with Title I money.
that's correct.
So help me again get this right. If a school which is not designated Title I if that school wanted to has money, has allocated in its budget some money to acquire the Avid program, would they be able to do that?
I'm going to throw that to Mr. Carlin since it's a budget question. It's okay.
Oh,
Yes.
okay.
Basically, any of the schools that have the Avid or the Title I schools, if we were to pay for one, irregardless if it's the school's component budget, if it's not Title I funds, then you would start to supplant and you have to supplement, you can't supplant. So what that means is we'd have to pay all of the Title I schools plus that one school out of general fund.
Well, let me, maybe I probably did not express myself right. We know that all these schools are designated Title I and have AVID. Should you have a school that is not, let's say, for example, Brockman, okay, just because the example is just really easy. We know it's not a Title I school, but they wanted to get AVID and pay out of their own money, not Title I money. Could they, or if there were to be a donation from the PTO to get the program? I mean, I know the example is absurd, but would they be able to do that?
I would have to look into it, but my answer right now would be no.
Okay, it's that supplanting notion
Yeah.
that I really want to make sure that I understand.
Right, and we're going to
correctly.
be going through an audit on that specific item. In fact, I'm asked right now to give some more information on that.
From whom, Mr. Carter?
From the state,
From whom?
the state auditors.
The state auditor, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And usually we get an answer within what time frame?
Oh, I'm going to look into your question.
Okay.
I'm just saying right now, we're working on getting answers for the state auditors, asking about the similar things.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much. I'm done.
Okay, are there any other questions on 7.5? Not, we'll call for the vote, and I need to take this manual as well. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those that oppose say nay. Ayes have it, the vote is unanimous. The item as previously stated in 7.5 has been approved. We'll now move to 7.6, which is a contract extension for hand sanitizing stations, rental, and supplies. Ms. Outing.
Madam Chair, members of the board, Dr. Witherspoon, the administration is requesting approval to extend a contract to UniFirst Corporation to provide hand sanitizing stations, rentals, and supplies. The administration so recommends.
You've heard the recommendation of the administration. What's the pleasure of the board?
Move for approval, Madam Chair.
Second.
It's been moved by Commissioner Devine and second by Commissioner, is it Myers or Clyburn? Y'all moving your mouth so fast, I can't see it.
Myers.
Commissioner Myers, second. Okay, we'll now open the floor for any questions or comments. Commissioner Lomanak?
Thank you, Chairwoman Harris. Ms. Outing, just a few questions. So we've already contracted with them previously, right?
That's correct.
And explain to me a little bit more, are these stations in classrooms or are they not in classrooms?
I'm going to allow Mr. Henry, if Dr. Witherspoon would give you clarification and information
Okay.
on this contract.
Thank you so much.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Hey.
Yes, sir. The stations are located in classrooms and other areas as designated by the site administrator.
And so I guess what struck me obviously is the amount. And let me be clear, I'm not anti-hand sanitizer. I understand it helps keep students from getting the flu and other things, and therefore teachers from getting the flu and other things. I guess I want to ensure, I mean, it's almost $250,000, and I understand when you're trying to buy a lot of hand sanitizer, 12,000 gallons of it, it accumulates. But if we're going to spend almost $250,000, I want to make sure that no teacher has to spend their own money on hand sanitizer like I used to have to and bring in these little containers. And, you know, what I've heard from teachers just, you know, in the last few days is I've got one in my room, but it hasn't been filled since last March. I don't have any in my room, or from somebody at a school. I don't think we've got any of those at all here. How can we ensure that all of these teachers will have these in their classrooms and that they will be filled appropriately if we're going to spend this amount of money?
Good question. Once approved tonight, the vendor will provide the district with 2,500 brand-new stations. Those 2,500 stations will be divided between the schools as we had before. We partnered with UniFirst back in 2020 during the pandemic. In fact, that partnership allowed us a jump start over other folks because we were able to get it. We're actually upgrading. We're removing the present stations. Some of them are in disrepair. The new stations will be put back in place with some brand new cartridges. So we're going away from the liquid, and I'll be honest that the liquid wasn't the best quality at that time when we were in the middle of a pandemic. However, these will be very nice. They will be foam containers, foam cartridges instead of liquid. So it'll be a very nice setup. So everyone will have plenty of hand sanitizer. The company will be routing to every one of our schools every week, speaking with our building coordinators. So if there's a shortage, it will be restocked on a weekly basis.
And is it the company's responsibility to actually restock it, or do they just bring the cartridges to the school and then the building supervisor takes care of it from there?
My building supervisor will take care of actually placing the cartridge into the container.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you, Chairwoman Harris.
Commissioner King?
So, Mr. Henry, well, my concern is, obviously with the old ones, I'd go under and nothing would happen for most of the ones. Can you hear me? And so they were depleted from their gel content, and so essentially useless. I had some heartburn in putting some extra work on either teachers to replenish those or our custodians who are already in shortage and just overworked, et cetera. So when the vendor comes around, do they identify the ones that are empty in the school?
When the vendor comes around, they will be speaking with our building coordinator. One of the upsides to having foam cartridges is they will last a very long time. So whenever we have a container that's getting empty, then we will have that stock, and either my day or night custodians can change that cartridge in a matter of seconds.
Is there any sort of signal that flashes or anything like that it's empty?
I do not believe there's a signal. I think that it's a clear display, so I think that you'll be able to see it.
Okay. And is this something that you think the district we're going to do for a long time versus just going back to classrooms, bottles that can be refilled?
I'm sorry?
Obviously, we're paying for the device and then the supply of gel, right? Versus just the district buying bottles and distributing them to the teachers, or having, the teachers' classroom supplies increased by a certain amount so that they can buy their own supply. Is this a better solution? And is this a long-term solution?
I think it's a very good solution. The containers that we purchased over 2 years from 2020 to 22, we actually own. The company is actually replacing these at virtually no cost to the district. So that's actually a savings of $125,000. We're only paying a quarter to the vendor to actually maintain these. So if the batteries go dead, they will replace the batteries. If they are dysfunctional, they'll fix them. If they're broken, they'll replace them. So I think it's a great opportunity here for the dollars that we are paying. If we're talking about whether or not we need to do this in perpetuity, I really don't know. It's an ever-changing world out there, so whatever the administrators would like me to do, I can certainly take that under advisement.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Bishop?
Thank you for giving us this information. Just want to know, how did we come up with 12,500 as a number of gallons? How did
That was, I asked the vendor to estimate. It's pretty hard for them to estimate, but
Yeah,
You know, you're looking at the number of pumps, the number of kids we
That's right.
have
How
over
many
a period
times
of
they use it.
time, and they came up with that figure. We overestimated the first time we did this, so we took that number down a bit.
all right, so we overestimated before, we reduced it. So the real challenge is just getting it restocked, right? Just like paper towels, just like soap dispensers. The challenge is just getting it restocked. And we're gonna make sure we just do an effort throughout the district to keep those stations stocked, right?
Yes, sir.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Commissioner Clyburn?
Yes, and I think your comment prior to Commissioner Bishop asking that question may have answered my question. But what I wanted to clarify was the benefit of the rental as opposed to purchasing. So the company, of course, when you're renting, will, you know, be responsible for maintaining if it malfunctions or breaks or needs to be replaced for whatever reason, as opposed to us purchasing, which would probably cost a lot more, and they would not be responsible for that. We would have to just replace it on our own dime, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that.
Okay. Any other questions? Seeing none here now, we will call for the vote. We are voting on 7-6, which is the contract extension, and we're going to take this manual. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Those that oppose, say nay. The ayes have it. The item as previously stated in 7-6 has been approved. We'll now move to 7-7, which is a contract extension for the temporary school psychologist staffing services. Ms. Outing.
Madam Chair, members of the board, Dr. Witherspoon, the administration is requesting approval to extend contracts to the 8 vendors as outlined to provide temporary school psychologist staffing services. The administration so recommends.
You've heard the recommendation of the administration. What's the pleasure of the board?
Move for approval.
Second.
It's been moved by Commissioner Bishop, second by Commissioner Myers. We'll now open the floor for questions. Commissioner Lomanak.
Thank you, Chairwoman Harris. Ms. Outing, and I'm not sure if you'll know this or not, but how many vacancies do we have as compared to last year in the school psychologist division?
I don't have the answer to that.
You have that, Dr.
Commissioner Lomanak, I do not have the answer to that, but I can tell you that even with the contracted services, we will still have a deficit.
And I guess that's what I mean, last time I checked the website, we have 6 at least posted school psychologist positions. It sounds as if we had a little bit of a mini exodus of school psychologists towards the end of last year. Do we know the reasons? Do we do exit interviews with those school psychologists to figure out why they left?
Yes, we do with them as we do with all our staff.
And
We're
so-
willing to do one.
What do you have? Are there any common threads among the folks who left last year, so that we can not repeat that with the school psychologists this year?
I can't tell you at the moment specifically for the school psychologists.
And I think Dr. Broussard was getting to this. So the way I look at this, we're basically contracting out about $2,800 or so, depending on the hourly rate, but about 2,800 hours. I think one full-time school psychologist is about 1,400 hours. So basically, this is going to cover about a third of our current needs. Is that close to correct?
I can't respond to that question specifically. I will tell you that I spoke with Ms. Dixon this afternoon, who said that with the services that we would have through this contract, we would still be operating at a deficit as we did last year, but this certainly positions us better to provide for the needs of the children.
Sure, and let me be clear. I'm not against this contract. We need, obviously, what I'm concerned about is this going to be enough? Because our school psychologists are the folks that mainly do the evaluations for IEPs, do all the work for, the majority of the work for special ed in terms of the evaluations that have to be conducted in a timely manner according to the law. Is there a concern that we're not going to be able to meet those requirements even after getting these 2.5 worth of psychologists, or do we feel like we're going to be okay?
We feel like we're going to be okay. What may happen is that our responses may be a little bit slower, but whereas we have federal guidelines around how quickly we have to respond, and we try to really beat those deadlines, so we may be a little bit later than we want to be in fulfilling responsibilities, but we believe that we can meet the needs.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Broussard, Ms. Outing. Thank you, Chairwoman Harris.
Commissioner Myers?
Just a quick question. Looking at this vendor list, how many new companies are we reaching out this year?
I don't know the answer to that. Dr. Hagwood, do you know?
Can you repeat the question?
Just,
I think you must know, are any of these vendors that are listed, are they new or are these returning vendors?
Okay, there is one vendor that we've used in the past, but because of the need, we need to identify additional resources, so that's why the list increased this year.
about how many? I tried that too.
By how many?
About how many?
How many increased?
Yes.
We used one as outlined on page 3 maximum, and the other 7 were added as additional resources, so we can pull from a variety of pools to meet our needs.
Thank you very much.
Commissioner Myers, the staffing agencies are having the same problem that we're having finding staff. So they don't have as many folks available to provide the services as they typically would have.
Thank you for clearing it up for me.
Interpreter?
She said, thank you for clearing that up.
Okay, all right. Any other questions? Commissioner King?
It's more of a comment. It'd be great to identify any of those exit interviews that were filled out by the psychologist and seeing what we could have done differently to at least retain some. I mean, that's part of our focus is retention. So, again, I'll ask that if you can identify the exit interviews specifically for the school psychologist, that the board be forwarded those interviews. Thank you.
Are there any additional questions or comments? Seeing none, hearing none, we will call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. The contract, as previously stated in 7-7, has been approved. Thank you so very much, Ms. Howden. We'll now move to the Office of Operations with 8-1, a contract for site licenses and professional development. Ms. Outing. I'm sorry.
My apologies. Can you repeat which line item, which?
We're at 8-1, the Office of Operations.
All right. Madam Chair, members of the board, Dr. Witherspoon, the administration is requesting approval to award a contract to IXL Learning to provide IXL site license and professional development. The administration so recommends.
You've heard the recommendation of the administration. What's the pleasure of the board?
Move for approval, Madam Chair.
Second.
Been moved by Commissioner Devine and second by Commissioner Clyburn. We'll open the floor for any questions or comments. Seeing none, hearing none, we will call for the vote. Electronic? Let the record reflect that the vote is unanimous and the contract, as previously stated, has been approved. Thank you, Ms. Outten. We'll now move to 8-2, which is the City of Columbia right of entry for the Greenview community. Mr. Perkins?
Good evening.
Good evening.
Madam Chair, members of the board, Dr. Witherspoon. Tonight we bring forth a easement, right of entry for the Greenview community along the property on North Main. This is to ease or allow the city to address some of the flooding issues along Wilkes Road. The administration so recommends.
You've heard the recommendation of the administration. What's the pleasure of the board?
Move for approval.
Second.
It's been moved by Commissioner Bishop, second by Commissioner Devine. We'll now open the floor for any questions or comments. Seeing none, hearing none, we will call for the vote. Electronic. Let the record reflect the vote is unanimous and approved. Thank you so much, Mr. Perkins. We'll now move to 9, which is the Office of Human Resources with 9-1, HR personnel updates. Dr. Long.
Madam Chair, Board of Commissioners, and Dr. Witherspoon, the personnel HR updates were provided for you all during the executive session as information.
It's an information item. Floor is open for any question or comment. Seeing none, hearing none, we'll move on to 9-2, which is an administrative hire. Dr. Long.
The administration recommends hiring Alma Newbick to the position of Director of Accounts Payable and Payroll in the Office of Financial Services. The administration so recommends.
You've heard the recommendation of the administration. What's the pleasure of the board?
Move for approval.
Second.
It's been moved by Commissioner Myers and second by Commissioner Devine. We'll open the floor for any questions or comments. Commissioner Lomanak.
Thank you, Chairwoman Harris. Dr. Long, I'm very happy that we're hiring somebody in this position. Can you tell everyone how long that position was open?
I think the position was open since May.
And so 4 months about, which I realize in this day is probably becoming more of the norm than not. Are there other openings in that department as well?
There are a few other openings.
And how many are there? Do you know?
I don't know, I have to check.
Is it true that the payroll supervisor has been open for 3 years?
It's been a while. I don't know if it's been 3 years, but it's been a while.
Do we know why that is?
Again, trying to find someone, the appropriate person to fill that position.
So in almost 3 years, we took 4 months to find someone in this crunch. We took 4 months to find someone to be director of payroll, but we haven't found one in 3 years predating the pandemic for the supervisor position?
Yes.
How many applications have we gotten for that position?
I don't know, I have to check that, Mr. Lomanet.
Okay. I think it would be great for the board to be provided with those applications so we can see. I mean, I'm just shocked that we have not in 3 years found someone that's qualified for that payroll supervisor position. And I say that because when we get to the board report, we'll talk about some of the very serious payroll problems that I continue to hear about as late as 3 hours ago from teachers and staff. So I'd like more information on what that process has looked like and why we haven't been able to fill that position when we were able to fill this other one so rapidly. Thank you, Chairwoman Harris.
Commissioner King.
Well, what I'd like to know is, we have the CFO here. Why can't some of these questions be answered? I mean, surely our CFO knows how many open positions are in that department, right?
Ms. Matthew Hazel.
I'll be glad to answer that. During this time frame, we not only have the payroll supervisor vacancy, we have several other vacancies in the payroll. And as you know, since COVID, one of the challenges we have in filling positions, and this is nationwide, as more and more positions go remotely, we are losing people. So the payroll position, since we have other vacancies, that is the position I transferred internally, a person who's been in that position before, who knows the process. And as we have vacancies, so payroll can continue to function, of course you want someone experienced in that position. Now the goal is to fill those positions once we start with the director, and once this director is in, she'll have the ability to fill all the other positions. That is the plan.
So I have a couple more questions. So you said you have somebody that's had that position before. Do you?
She operates, she's been laterally transferred over there because that's a critical position, and she is doing some responsibilities in her other position as well as this position. We also have temporaries aboard. And like I said before, because I have staff within other positions that can do the job in payroll, I will occasionally transfer members of my staff member into payroll as, as the peaks and valleys happen.
So how can somebody have essentially two positions? I mean,
This is additional duties in maybe one slot, but her main primary goal is to have the payroll supervisor responsibility.
right, I mean, my concern is that no one should wear two hats. I mean,
She's not wearing two hats. She
Oh.
is primarily the payroll supervisor, and she has some responsibility in her other position, some duties that must continue. And of course, we balance that depending on the peaks and valleys. Somebody else may pick up that. It's a balancing act when you have vacancies in a department.
Right, I mean, it's such an important position, it can't be a part-time position, essentially.
It is not a part-time position, I didn't
Well,
say
that's
that. I
right.
said it's a full-time position, and she has some additional duties. Not only that person, it's a balancing act when you have vacancies in your department. You have to keep the business moving.
For sure. Since Ms. Matthews Hazel, so this is somebody who's going to work for you, what I'd like to know is, in light of a lot of payroll hiccups that have happened for several years, and recently have sort of accumulated and accelerated, this person that you're recommending for the payroll, the Director of Payroll and Accounts Payable, will they be able to conduct an audit of the function and really have an opportunity to look at where all the glitches are and offer and fix that?
That payroll person is very experienced. Where she comes from, yes, she'll be able to make assessments on, as she look at each system. As you know, a lot of workflow is into the payroll system. So it may not necessarily be the payroll, is somewhere in that workflow. So we're going to look at the overall workflow, which comes from departments to HR to payroll. So she will make an assessment in addition to hiring staff. I will be involved and some others will be involved in making that assessment.
Okay, so to you, Dr. Witherspoon, and to you, Ms. Matthews Hazel, I think it would be very important to actually have some sort of a report to the board on the issues and then the solutions. Of course, we always want to focus on the solutions. So that's my ask. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Are there any other questions or comment? Commissioner Lomanak.
Thank you, Chairwoman Harris. Ms. Matthews Hazel, you just described that open supervisor payroll position is critical. Is there a reason we haven't just hired that person as the full-time person to fill that slot since it is so critical?
Well, because we have several key positions in payroll available, the payroll supervisor is the main person who can train as new people come on. And as I mentioned before, we hire from up to down. That person, the payroll supervisor, can fill in different positions, move, laterally transfer, or hire a temp to help with those other vacancies. But that payroll supervisor is in the driver's seat. So you don't want to remove that person at all until we have all the other positions filled. Now, like I mentioned before, the director is a board, and then she'll be filling in all the key positions now. And I'll be working with her to do that.
And I don't think I was clear, I'm sorry. Is there a reason that the person who's acting as payroll supervisor hasn't been put into that role permanently?
She is a lateral transfer. It would not be a promotion. Once we fill that position, she'll go back to her old position. In other words, they're the same level.
And so we do want to fill that position, but for 3 years, we haven't been able to.
For 3 years, we have had challenges with vacancies.
Thank you, Chairwoman Harris.
Okay, are there any other questions or comments on this particular item? Not, we will call for the vote, and that is electronic, correct? Let the record reflect the vote is unanimous. The administrative hire, as previously stated in 9.2, has been approved. Now move to 9.3, which is leave of absence. Dr. Long.
The administration recommends approval for the leave of absence without pay for the teacher with the initials AK. The administration so recommends.
You've heard the recommendation of the administration. What's the pleasure of the board?
Move for approval. Second.
It's been moved by Commissioner Devine, second by Commissioner Bishop. We'll now open the floor for question or discussion. Seeing none, hearing none, we will call for the vote. Electronic. Let the record reflect the vote is unanimous. The leave of absence, as previously stated in 9.3, has been approved. 9.4, hiring of personnel. Dr. Long.
The administration recommends hiring the teachers on the attached list for the 22-23 academic year. There are 17 teachers listed. The administration so recommends.
You've heard the recommendation of the administration. What's the pleasure of the board?
Move for approval, Madam Chair.
Second.
Been moved by Commissioner Devine, second by Commissioner Bishop. We'll open the floor for question or discussion. Commissioner King.
I'm asking my question in the dark because I can't pull up the thing on here. But essentially, I think it's the last, if y'all can look and help me through here. It's the last position that's, it's not a teacher, it's some sort of administrator or coach or whatever. And I don't even know what that means. I'm assuming that would be under Dr. Broussard's shop, maybe? I can't pull it up. I'm sort of frozen here.
Instructional services.
Right.
Consultant for learning environments and instructional resources.
Right. Dr. Broussard, did you hear that?
I'm sorry, I did not hear your question.
I'm sorry. Can you pull it up on your computer?
No.
You can't? Okay.
It's instructional services.
Yes.
Consultant for learning environments and instructional resources.
That's it. That is to fill a vacant position where we moved someone who was in that position in instructional services. We moved that person from another position.
And what does that position do?
In instructional services,
Yes.
that whole office helps provide support for implementation of our Title II, for planning all of our professional development, supporting all the professional development for teachers and administrators, as well as classified staff.
Is that a critical position? Is it a certified position?
It is.
I guess it is a certified position.
It is a certified.
Is it a critical position?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, because I know that the schools that I'm touring, I mean, they're the reading coaches, the reading interventionists, the math coaches, the math interventionists, they're all now covering classrooms. So,
Yes.
I would imagine that at this point, anytime we can put our hands on certified people, they're going to end up in the classroom.
Well, we have really slimmed down in teaching and learning. We have several positions that we just did not fill this year because of the classroom vacancies that needed to be filled.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Seeing none, we'll call for the vote electronically. Let the record reflect the vote is unanimous. The hiring of personnel, as previously stated in 9.4, has been approved. We'll now move to the office of the board with 10.1, which is the student tuition waiver request. Ms. Coles.
Madam Chair, Board of Commissioners, Dr. Witherspoon, the administration recommends approval of the out-of-district transfer with full tuition waiver for the student with the initials CG to Dreer High School for reasons outlined during executive session. The administration so recommends.
You've heard the recommendation of the administration. What's the pleasure of the board?
Move for approval?
Second.
It's been moved by Commissioner Clyburn, second by Commissioner Devine. We'll open the floor for question or discussion. Seeing none, hearing none, we will call for the vote. Electronic. Do we need to do it manual? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those that oppose say nay. The ayes have it. The transfer is approved. We'll now move on to 10-2, which is to close and reallocate capital projects. Mr. Carlin.
Madam Chair, members of the board, Dr. Witherspoon, the administration requests approval to close and reallocate capital projects. The administration is requesting to close 3 capital projects and reallocate amount closed, 3 capital projects plus the balance in Fund 518 is a total of $397,609. The administration is requesting to reallocate the above amount from closed projects to the Olympia underground stormwater drainage, $300,000, and the balance to building and district needs, $97,609. The administration recommends approval of this reallocation of capital projects in the amount of $397,609. The administration so recommends.
You've heard the recommendation of the administration. What's the pleasure of the board?
Move for approval.
Second?
Been moved by Commissioner Devine, second by Commissioner Clyburn. We'll now open the floor for question or discussion. Seeing none, hearing none, we will, Commissioner Clyburn.
So I had one question. As far as the time frame on, some of this work and repairs, do we have?
Mr. Henry is telling me that he is going to start tomorrow and hopefully have it done in a couple of weeks.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Commissioner King?
So this is probably, doesn't fall under this list, but during school visits, I see that a lot of our portables are in really bad shape. Do you have
Yes, we have a capital project for that, and they have been out looking at them. I'll have to see what time frame they have to get those refixed up now.
all right, is that something you can share with us? When you have it?
Yeah.
Okay,
sure.
that'd be great.
Sure.
Thanks.
Okay, are there any other questions or comments? Commissioner Lomanak?
Thank you, Chairman Harris. Mr. Carlin, I think I know the answer from committee meeting, but I think it would be useful for the public to know. Can you explain, in part because I think it's a really good idea and it's important, but that building and district needs, it says $97,000. Can you explain what that is and what we try to have on hand for things like that?
Yes, sir. During the course of the year, we have small projects that come up, and we'd like to get to them as soon as possible. This is where we can allocate less than $50,000 to a project, especially if it's something that needs done quickly. We normally have somewhere between $200,000 to $300,000 available for that, and currently we have just under $100,000. So this will push us back up close to $200,000 for this year.
Thanks, Mr. Carlin. Thank you, Harris.
Commissioner King?
Just clarification, Mr. Carlin, is there a particular meaning to the $50,000 figure? You said for projects that are $50,000?
Yes, we used to do it for $30,000 or less, and I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, we asked to have that moved up to $50,000.
Just because of inflation and things like that?
Yeah, just
Okay,
because of how
okay.
much
I was just
small
curious.
just because of how much
Because
small.
it went up? Okay, great, thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments at this time? Not, we'll call for the vote. Electronic? Let the record reflect the closing reallocation capital projects has been approved. The vote is unanimous. We'll now move on to 10.3, which is the fiscal 2022-23 year special revenue budget. Mr. Carlin.
Madam Chair, members of the board, Dr. Witherspoon, the administration requests approval of fiscal year 22-23 special revenue budgets. This list includes 18 special revenue budgets for fiscal year 22-23. Some of the larger ones, Title II, Part A, Improving Teacher Quality, $1.5 million. State aid to classrooms, $14.3 million. National Board Certified, $1.5 million. Career Specialists, $990,000. Total of all these is $21,712,678. The administration requests the approval of the fiscal year 22-23 special revenue budgets. The administration so recommends.
You've heard the recommendation of the administration. What's the pleasure of the board?
Move for approval, Madam Chair.
Second.
Been moved by Commissioner Devine, second by Commissioner Clyburn. We'll open the floor for question or discussion. Commissioner King?
So, Mr. Carlin, this does not represent the totality of special revenues, right?
No, ma'am.
Okay, and so
We'll be bringing more at a later date, and we had brought the student nutrition and warehouse earlier.
Okay, so for the 22-23, how much do you think the totality of special revenues are?
The average is about $50 million.
50?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and so, all right. Okay, that's all I have.
Okay. Commissioner Lomanak?
Thank you, Chairwoman Harris. Mr. Carlin, I've just got a question because I think I'll get it after the meeting, and I'd rather you answer it during the meeting because I think you'll do a better job. The state aid to classrooms, the $14 million, will you explain kind of where that comes from and the change in the state budget?
Yes. The state changed the funding for school districts this year. We used to get a base student cost and other funding from the state. This year, they went, so we won't have that base student cost anymore. They are funding it from the general fund and from EIA funding. So that $14 million is actually coming from the special revenue side, and the state is saying, yes, you can put this into your general fund. If we didn't do that, we'd have a negative amount compared to last year from the state. But this is part of the state funding. You have state aid from general fund, you have state aid from EIA, and this is the special revenue part, and that's the $14 million. And it's a calculation that I'm still working on, how they're doing it, but maybe one day I'll figure out their whole formula.
And to be clear, it's a different formula with some different names, but we did not get 14 million more dollars this year than we have in the prior years, right?
That is correct. We probably actually got a little bit less on the special revenue side because 2.8 million was on the special revenue side. We have to now put in the general fund.
Okay. And then just one other question. Most of these, or tell me if I'm wrong about this, most of these are money that is specifically designated for very specific things, like adult education. That's not money that Richland 1 gets and decides we're going to spend it on adult education, right?
That is correct. Almost every special revenue is a designated expenditure that they want you to spend it on. But I will say that they have, for the last, I'm going to say 8 to 10 years, allowed us to do flexibility. Now, you can't flex all funds, but you can flex some of them, and you have to be at a certain percentage of spending on instruction, and that is 75% based on their categories. And we have been, at least over the last 5 years, probably the last 8 years, over 80%.
All right, thank you, Mr. Carlin. Thank you, Chairwoman Harris.
At this time, we'll call for the vote. Electronic. Let the record reflect, the vote is unanimous to approve the special revenue budgets for the 22-23 school year. We'll now move to 10-4, which is the second reading. Policy DJE, DJEA, DJEB, DJEBA, purchasing authority, quality control, specifications, cooperative purchasing, bids, and quotations. Ms. Outing.
Madam Chair, members of the board, Dr. Witherspoon, the administration presents for second reading approval policy DJE, DJEA, DJEB, DJEBA, purchasing authority, quality control, specifications, cooperative purchasing, bids, and quotations. The amendments and/or revisions are outlined as written. Administration so recommends.
You've heard the recommendation of the administration. What's the pleasure of the board?
Move for approval.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Devine and second by Commissioner Clyburn. We'll now open the floor for question or discussion. Commissioner Lomanak.
Thank you, Chairwoman Harris. Ms. Outing, we've been back and forth on this proposed policy, and I want to try to make sure and set the context. Before July 1 of 2022, the board voted on any contract over $50,000. Is that right?
Correct, before June 30th of 2022.
And that was written in our procurement policy up to that point?
That was written in the procurement code, not the procurement policy.
And, right, that was the internal Richland 1 procedures part of the procurement code?
Code, correct.
Okay. And then a few weeks ago at the last board meeting, there was a proposal that we only vote on a contract that's $250,000 or above, right?
That was presented at the time, and that has since been removed.
So we went from $50,000 to a proposal of $250,000. Am I right in reading this, that with the exception of some very specific circumstances, the school board will no longer vote on any contracts if this policy goes into effect?
The code that went into effect July 1 was the recommendation from the state, whereas we adopted a model school district code. That code did not determine or outline any specific dollar amount. So that is the code that the board approved on May 10th, 2022.
And so if we then in turn approve this policy that's now written to say, look to the code for everything, the board will no longer vote on contracts like it did tonight. Is that right?
They will not. However, the superintendent has the authority and according to the code as is written that was adopted May 10th, to delegate a specific amount that will be presented to the board.
And I've got some other questions about kind of publication as I'm learning more and more about procurement policy. Can you explain, so the South Carolina Business Opportunities is a website that we can use to advertise jobs, right?
Jobs?
Or advertise contracts?
Yes, sir. It's the South Carolina's SCIBO, South Carolina Business Opportunity, is a state-ran publication for advertising. That's just one source.
And that's a free source, right?
That's correct.
Is there a reason that we didn't elect in our procurement code to use that rather than the state newspaper? I know we've said we can use either one. Is there an advantage to the state newspaper over the SCIBO?
No, so that was the recommendation of the state. That's their language that we adopted.
Well, the state's model code does not include the state newspaper, right?
I can't sustain that or answer that at this very moment to look at it. I could give you an answer if I go back and check.
Well, I think when I looked over the model code, it suggested that we use SCIBO, but it had alternative text. If we were determined not to use SCIBO, we could elect to use another newspaper of general circulation in our district. But so I guess that's my question. We weren't forced to say the state newspaper, and in fact, the state procurement folks seem to be interested in everybody using SCIBO because it's one place for folks to go to see all the contracts. So is there a reason that we didn't just stick with SCIBO?
Because we wanted to expand our range of allowing open and fair competition. So therefore, that additional resource that we've been using in the past, we added that, and the state did not disallow us to do that because it's an additional resource.
So does that mean for a particular contract, we would use both?
For specific contracts.
Okay, because it does, I mean, it only expands it if we're using both, because otherwise, there's some advantage to using the same thing all the time, isn't there? Because someone knows I can always go there and look for potential contracts, right?
And normally that is an advertised resource nationwide that the vendors can subscribe to, not necessarily in the state of South Carolina. So it is still a national publication.
And one of the questions I guess I had is I've noticed that we haven't involved the internal auditor, and in our committee meetings in any official capacity, I would love to have heard his take on this policy, what he thinks we need to do, if he's got any questions or concerns about these things. Is there a reason that we haven't asked for anything from him about this policy? Because it's a pretty big change, I think, that we're being asked to make, to go from pretty decent oversight to not very much. Is there a reason we haven't involved the internal auditor?
Dr. Witherspoon, you.
Well, as Ms. Outing has indicated, we have mirrored this and looked at the model code from the state that was adopted. And I will say, in terms of oversight and transparency, that we will be providing quarterly reporting, and then all transactions are on the district's website that any and everybody can go take a look at. So that reporting and that information is there.
When you say transactions, do you mean the check register, or is there?
Check register.
Okay, but there's not a separate place on the website where we have all contracts that heretofore we would have approved, but there's not a separate place that has all those contracts like we have in board docs for each meeting, right?
There will be reporting out. We will have a quarterly report for the board.
And will that report include all contracts for that quarter that have been entered into?
Yes.
And will there be any limitation on the amounts of those contracts that we'll learn about?
Yes, it'll be, anything that doesn't come to the board. Anything above a certain amount would still come to the board.
I mean, I guess my biggest concern is I'm sure some people thought my questions about the psychological services or about the professional development around SC Ready were stupid, but I generally think that that's really helpful to have those discussions in public, and so in part so that the public can understand. I mean, sometimes I ask questions that we've already asked in committee meeting just to make sure that the public hears it, and I'm worried that we're going to not have that anymore. And yet the board, under the state procurement model code and the one that we adopted, there's a specific obligation for us to audit this process, but I feel like we're going to be doing it at the back end, and it's going to create a lot of concerns in the public when we don't have these open discussions. Has there been any, maybe I'm the only one that's concerned about that, but are you not concerned at all about the perception that's going to create?
Well, perception is sometimes what you put out there versus saying that processes are being followed and the information is there for those anybody to see. But in terms of that quarterly reporting piece, we can look at that and have that information on what that was about or what have you can certainly be included in there, and that's something we can work through.
Well, and maybe this is a question for Ms. Williams more than anyone else, but is there anything in the code that we've adopted as of July 1st that prohibits the board from including in this policy what we had before in the internal procedures, which was a $50,000 or above contract comes to the board as it has for years? Is there anything that precludes us from doing that?
Can you hear me?
There we go.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. When all of the board policies were addressed, because of costs that have increased, we needed to make some changes with regard to the $50,000. And so we don't just have that anymore because the costs have gone up and changes and recommendations that came from School Boards Association. They did make some recommendations that we followed, and it is to address changes that have just come by because things have changed.
Well, I'm sorry, go ahead.
And so that was one of the things that, since we were already talking about increasing that amount, that $50,000 is no longer used just to say what we spend for $50,000 in terms of getting an approval. So that one certainly changed.
Well, I guess I'm asking, in addition to the code, couldn't we, as part of this policy, say the board is going to approve any contract over blank amount? The code doesn't preclude us from putting that into our policy, correct?
If that is what the board wishes to do, that is something that can be discussed and looked at.
So, I mean, we could go back to, that one, we had a policy or a draft that said 250,000. Personally, I thought that was too high, but we could include a price amount in this policy that would get us to a point that's similar to where we have been for this meeting, where we were discussing those contracts, right?
If that is what the board decides and votes upon.
All right, I don't have any further questions for right now, Chairwoman Harris. Thank you.
Okay, well now, Ms. King?
So I guess I've had a hard time really following this this policy, and it's a policy that I really care about because there needs to be a stopgap, and it's still not included in there. But I'm going to start at the beginning. So we started in June, on June 28th, with one version of this policy. It was presented at the board meeting, and then on July 26th, that policy came back to a board meeting, and it was a different language. And then it came on August 23rd, and on August 23rd, there was again a different language. And then at the committee meeting that we had in September 6th, the language changed again, and then that was a week ago. And then today, on the 13th, what we talked about in committee meeting a week ago has changed. So I'm really lost around all this. However, what is not lost on me is the fact that, from what I understand from this discussion, and I find it quite alarming actually, is that the board goes from a history of good fiscal oversight, of approving contracts anywhere from 50K up to virtually nothing. One of my concern is, Ms. Outing, when you presented the new code in May, you also, which I really thought was super beneficial, right? You included a document which is essentially as an executive summary that's entitled Richland County School District 1, District Procurement Code Summary of Significant Changes. And that really is very helpful, so thank you for that. However, what I'm not seeing in that document at all is actually the total removal of that section 540 of the code, the procurement code, that held the language where the board reserved itself the right to approve contracts over $50,000, and why was that change not mentioned in this document?
Dr. Witherspoon, you want me to?
Go ahead.
Commissioner King, that particular document highlighted some of the verbiage that was some of our day-to-day operational items that we dealt with in procurement. The area in that particular summary identifies the internal operating procedures, which is a new methodology that the state is requiring all school districts to adopt. The internal operating procedures dictate what is approved, and it's through the superintendent. So that particular language, the internal operating procedures, those procedures were actually adopted as our old code. And so with us bringing this particular policy to the board to ensure that it matches what you all approved May 10th, that's why that particular language was not specifically identified as such. Our old code became our new internal operating procedures. That in turn had to be updated. And based on the state code that we adopted, the model code for all school districts, did not identify any specific dollar amount.
And I get that. What I really don't get is that change is at the core of this discussion. And I wish that your document had reflected that change, because that is where the alarm bell would have rung, and we would have had, back in May, had that discussion, and we wouldn't be here now in September after the code's been adopted. And I feel blindsided. I will tell you, I feel super blindsided on this, and I don't know how my colleagues feel, but to go from 50K oversight to 0 oversight, I think, one, is really super bad policy, and two, just not the, it's actually the state procurement code does not prevent us from putting those stopgap. And then my final comment, I come back again and again and again and again and again to the fact that we have to have, if the board is going to have oversight at a particular dollar threshold where the board has to vote, the administration has to provide in the policy language that will put a hold on any contracts that after initial approval that the originally approved amount changes down the road. You know, anything can change, and we would not know anything about it. And I think that's essentially, it's leaving it's a blank check. And as a board member with fiscal oversight, we can't sign a blank check. That's what we've been doing, and with this, it becomes even more so. Make sure that, yes?
Yeah. My mic is on.
Yeah.
I do want to point out that Dr. Witherspoon, he has asked procurement director and myself to go back. We will be making the superintendent will be setting an amount for the authority. That will go into the internal procedures. It won't be a blank check. So if that dollar amount, it will not be in the board policy. It will be in the procedures. And one of the things that Dr. Witherspoon had mentioned earlier was whatever that amount is established, we will come back and give whether it's a monthly or quarterly report to the board, letting you know that these were the amounts that the administration did not bring to the board once that threshold is set.
Well, I appreciate that, Ms. Matthews-Hazel, but I would appreciate even more if you guys would come to us with a complete picture instead of, I mean, we've been at it since well, for a long time, but since May. Why can't you come to us and saying, this is what has changed, this is what we're proposing, and because we've heard your concerns, we have already thought of the procedures, and here they are. That would really, I mean, that's how things need to function. And yet we get a drip, drop here and there of this process, which is super important. I don't understand that.
This is all new, as you know, that's just recently passed. So it will be brought forth to you. Full disclosure, you know, once everything is set in place, you know, in internal procedures. All of this, as you know, you just approved the code, so we will be solidifying this in the next couple of weeks. We just need to push this policy through because the procurement code is in place now.
Well, what does the policy do then? I mean, what does it prevent you from doing now? I mean, I'd much rather put out there a motion that we postpone it until you guys have all your ducks in a row and come back with a complete picture. I mean, that's how things are done properly in a normal environment.
Well,
So-
currently, the 50,000 is still being brought forward. As you
No,
can see
because
now.
it's not in, it's
Nothing
not,
has changed.
it's
with
not in the
50,000.
procurement code anymore.
Yes, ma'am.
It's not in the procurement code anymore. It's not in the procurement code anymore. It's gone. So it's, in fact, tonight, we voted on contracts, and it's not in the procurement code. So we didn't really have to vote on those contracts.
Ms. King, let me point out a few things.
Oh, well, thank you, Ms. Harris. Please clarify the picture for me. I need help.
Number one, we've been working with this contract since May. Now, this stuff has been discussed in our committees, which you've missed. And I shared that with you in the last meeting. So this is not new to the rest of this board. I have the floor, and you can speak when I'm done, I promise you. So you've missed these folk presenting to us what you're saying. I think you're getting all of this confused. The state code change, not Richland 1. This is their code, and we had to adopt it so we could submit it to the State Department, correct? The state code change, but the weeds of how we conduct the code is the process and the procedure part. That is what Ms. Matthew Hazel is talking about coming back to us about. We did suspend the vote from the last meeting at your request so that you could get more information in committee meeting, which I believe you were in attendance to, the last one. That they walked down the line of everything that we were doing, why we were doing it, what other districts were doing. Dr. Witherspoon came back and asked that they put a limit in there for us because it was asked. So right now, we're just trying to get the code part of this adopted. The administrative rule is the way we carry out the policy. The administrative rule is not what the board does. We set the policy. They set the administrative rule in how it is carried out. So that's where the limit would be set. That's what's coming back to the board. I'm trying to break it down. There's three things going on at one time. State code change. That changed everything for everybody in the state of South Carolina. We had to adopt that. But then with it changing, we had to adjust our policy. So when you saw the policy change and it wasn't the same verbiage that we were used to, that's because the code dictated that that change could be made. However, the way they carry this out now is in that part we don't vote on, which is the administrative rule, and that is what they're saying. That part is going to be done because the superintendent has asked to put in place a limit. So we're kind of all saying the same thing, it's just going under a different umbrella. It will be an administrative rule, and that is coming back to us, but they can't do the rule until we approve the policy. Is that what we're working through? We're trying to get the policy in place.
That's correct.
Then the rule is coming back because we have asked for a limit. So we're all kind of saying the same thing, but you've got to realize there's three things going on right now. State codes change. Policy had to change because of the state code change. Now, the administrative, that's why it's called an administrative rule, because we don't set the rule. The administration sets the rule. That's where all of that will be worked out, and then that comes back to the board.
Madam Chair.
Is that clear, Commissioner Bishop?
So while you're clarifying everything, just one quick question, maybe to Ms. Howling or Dr. Witherspoon. If we don't adopt this code, will we be in non-compliance with the state?
Because it was approved May 10th, yes. However, because we have not approved the code, we were still operating under the $50,000 threshold until we got the approval to adopt this policy.
Okay, so just so we're clear, if we don't adopt it, this district will not be in compliance. Yes?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner King and then Commissioner Lomanak.
All right, let me unpack this. I may have missed one or two committee meetings. They were not the ones where this policy was discussed, so that's one. I have not missed a single board meeting where this policy was discussed. So even if I had been absent at the committee meeting, there would still have been a discussion at the board meeting, and I have been present at all of those. So that in itself is a non-issue. Secondly, we are now on September 13th. So we are, if I don't really think that the state looks at it as non-compliance, because this was supposed to be adopted by July 1. So it's not all of a sudden that we're in compliance. We should have had this brought forth. And I have another question for you, Ms. Outing. Now, don't you have to submit to the state procurement office the code that we're submitting? I mean, don't you have to submit to them our code?
The code was submitted and is posted on the state website. It was approved based on the approval that was presented May 10th.
Right, so we're not in compliance because we have that code.
Well, we're not operating because your policy hadn't been approved for
Right.
second reading.
But
So
that
we
does-
are still abiding by our old code based on the $50,000 threshold. Everything else has been in place.
Right, but we're not out of compliance. So I would certainly would not label that out of compliance. We're totally in compliance. We're just having to have some internal discussions and negotiations to do. And then we usually have, when we pass the policy, we don't need, the process does not dictate that the policy has to be voted on before an administration rule is developed. That's nonsense. I mean, you develop the whole thing, the whole enchilada, because it's so important to know what the administrative rule is supporting into the policy. Both of them have to be presented at the same time. We are in the situation when only the policy is presented and not the administrative rule. So, you know, we adopt this, and I mean, it can take months for the administrative rule to be presented. That's an issue for me.
Okay. Commissioner Lomanak.
Thank you, Chairwoman Harris. I want to clarify a couple of things for myself, because a minute ago someone asked if we don't adopt this code, we're in violation. This isn't a code. We did adopt the code in a timely fashion pursuant to the state requirement, correct?
Correct.
What you're asking us to do, and the district, the administration is asking us to do, is adopt a policy that relates to that code.
Yes, sir.
And the $50,000, the prior requirement, that was not in policy, correct?
That was not.
Okay.
No dollar amount was never in any policy related to procurement.
Right. So tell me the date by which districts are supposed to, I understand there's a July 1 date or June 30th date for the code. What's the date that districts are expected to pass some new policy?
We don't have a date for that.
Okay. So we're not late on this policy issue.
No.
Okay.
Because we've already submitted to the state that the board approved through that date that we have adopted the model procurement code for all school districts. We, along with several other school districts in this state, have adopted this code.
And so we're in compliance with the state guidelines and regulations.
We're in compliance to a certain degree. However, based on the dollar amount that was in the old code, which we have to update and prepare the internal purchasing procedures, that is why we need to address that. That is why we need approval to move forward.
What's the current policy that's in effect today that relates to the procurement code?
The current policy as written does not delegate a dollar amount to come to the board. However, because out of respect, we are still operating under that dollar amount because the internal purchasing procedures have not been approved.
I guess that's my question. The current policy does not say anything about a dollar amount. The old internal operating procedures did. So if we didn't change the policy tonight and came back at a later date, we would still be in compliance with the state procurement regulators, right?
Again, to a certain degree, not 100%.
But that's because of the internal operating procedures, not this policy, right?
And the internal operating procedures were written, outlined in the new model code, which we adopted May 10th. So out of respect, as I just stated, we're not pursuing any dollar amount other than what was outlined in the old code. We're not changing that out of respect because that's the autonomy of the superintendent.
I guess, Dr. Witherspoon, I'd ask this. I mean, I don't want the board to slow down contracts for folks. And I know, and I suspect from talking to folks in the administration over the years that one of the reasons that administrations get frustrated by board having to approve them is it can slow it down. Totally get that. I've only been here a year. We haven't voted no on any contract. And so, I don't think that the vote has been the thing that's been the most important part. I think it's been the discussion about the contracts in public. Would it be possible to include in this that you simply post to board docs for every school board meeting any new contract that's been entered into as an information item so that we can just have a discussion about them in public but not in a quarterly fashion because there's just going to be so many, but just do it like we do now, except there won't be votes on them until you all get the internal operating procedures and come up with a dollar amount. But that going forward, we just put the contracts on board docs for each meeting as an information item that we can talk about. Is that a problem?
Let us take a look at that process. We will certainly look at that.
Okay. Are there any other questions or comments at this time? Seeing none, hearing none, we will call for the vote, and the vote is electronic.
Commissioner Chairman Harris, I hesitate to do this, but I'm going to move to table this until we've gotten an answer, until we've gotten something that we can include in this policy from Dr. Witherspoon about providing the contracts at each board meeting. I don't think that we have to approve this tonight, so I'm going to move to table this until we've gotten those further answers so that we can include anything else if we need to.
Second.
She called for the vote, so, and like me, I already voted. Because she said we moved to vote.
No, Mr. Devine, please, he raised his hand.
I did raise my hand, and then I
Yeah.
had to say something
Okay,
to get recognized.
Let's not do that. Come on.
I hear you, but I already, when
No,
she
no,
said
no,
we
no,
called
no,
for the vote came up, and I'm just telling you, like, I've already voted. So you were in the process of voting.
I would renew my motion to table this until we get more answers so that we can incorporate anything that we need to in this policy once we've gotten that additional information.
And I'll second that.
But you're in the middle of voting. You can't have a motion, once you call for the vote, you got to vote it up or vote it down, or either abstain.
We're already in the process of voting.
I'm going to renew my motion to table it
and
until such time we've got more information.
And I called for the vote, Mr. Lomanak, and there were no hands raised when I called for the vote. Then your hand went up. I didn't want to, because I'm not going to get into this bickering tonight. It's not, this is about children.
What's in the best interest?
Ms. King.
What's in the best interest? That's the question.
What's in the best interest of the children is doing right by the children.
Yeah.
And this discussion, Ms. King, we've had this discussion since May. And we're not gonna go back and forth tonight because that's unprofessional. But at the end of the day, I had to pull in Commissioner Myers and Commissioner Devine for your committee meeting because our secretary couldn't get you on the phone to discuss this. So it's okay, to not want to support this, but I heard our procurement manager tell us we are not in complete compliance right now. The things that Mr. Lomanak is asking for, I don't knock what he's asking for, but that is a part of the administrative rule. That's how we would carry this out, that the superintendent adds in the rule that, hey, I'm going to post these items and you will be able to verify the items or we can have discussion, et cetera. That's not policy. The policy is different from the way we carry out the administrative rule, and that's not done by us. It's good food for thought for the superintendent to go back with his folk and put together an administrative rule that will include the things that you're asking for. But the policy is on a whole nother level. Now, we've called for the vote, and the vote is in progress right now.
Ms. Harris,
So I'm going to ask that we vote.
Ms. Harris, you've allowed yourself to have a discussion, even though you called for the vote. That's what you just did. So you broke the rule too.
Ms. King, the discussion was over. There was a pause. There were no hands raised. I looked to my left and to my right, and I said, I'll call for the vote. By the time I said I called for the vote, at that time, Mr. Lomanak put his hand up. Now, let's be fair. I looked, and there were no hands raised when I called for the vote. But I am asking that Dr. Witherspoon, as it's been requested by the board, that in the administrative rule, it includes the things that have been asked. I think that point has been made tonight. that there are some concerns about the way we carry out the administrative rule side of this. They don't have to put a dollar amount because the state didn't mandate that. But because he heard the concerns of this board, and it wasn't just one or two, because in the committees, this has been shared by several board members. He is putting it in the administrative rule, everything we just talked about tonight. So again, the vote is in progress. Ms. Marietta, where are we at? I can't hear you. You waiting on one vote? Okay.
I've hit it repeatedly, but there it went.
And I can't see. Let the record reflect that the motion did pass, and the vote is 5 yeas and 2 nays. Thank you so much, Ms. Alton.
Thank you.
At this time, we'll move on to 10.5, which is board report. This is where the board has an opportunity to speak on an agenda or non-agenda item. We'll now open the floor for the board. Of course, we are starting back our chat with the chairs now that we're back in full swing of school. I believe we are planning to do all of those virtually for the time until Ms. Eva can get with us to decide how we would be able to navigate through the schools with being back in the schools to do our high school and middle school chats. I did just want to add that. We'll open the floor at this time. Commissioner Devine.
Thank you, Chairwoman Harris. I want to say that I am disappointed to learn about a article in a local paper regarding this board back in 2018. There was an allegation made by a board member regarding another board member, and basically at the time, Ms. King did not want Ms. Harris to exercise her right to vote. Although Ms. Harris was going to vote as she did, and it was her right to vote. Ms. Harris also was advocating for expanded service of the Ingenuity services to several schools in the Lower Richland community. When the complaint was made, I was vice chair. The complaint went to the superintendent, and that was not the appropriate place for it to go to. So the complaint came to me as board vice chair because complaint was made against the board chair. And there was a complaint made, an investigation, and the results of the investigation was a letter to Ms. King regarding the complaint. And this goes back to June of 2019. This letter is addressed to Beatrice King, Commissioner, Richland County School District 1, 1616 Richland Street, Columbia, South Carolina, 29201, regarding Richland County School District 1 complaint. And it reads as follows: Dear Ms. King, please allow this letter to serve as the district's formal response to your letter of complaint dated September 5th, 2018, wherein you discuss events stemming from your instance that 2 board members recused themselves from a matter at the Richland County School District 1 Board of Commissioners' regularly scheduled meeting on August 28, 2018. In the complaint, you allege that Chairwoman Harris engaged in a violent physical outburst which required 3 men to stop her advances towards you, which made you fear for your safety. Accordingly, the complaint informs the district that you reported the above actions to law enforcement and request the presence of an external mediator during executive session, as well as the implementation of additional security measures during board meetings. As I recall, the board was set to vote on the extension of the district's contract with Ingenuity SC during public session. However, prior to the vote taking place, you insisted that Chairwoman Harris and I recuse ourselves because Chairwoman Harris and my wife sat on the board of Ingenuity SC. Notably, neither Chairwoman Harris nor my wife received compensation for their service on Ingenuity SC's board. As such, we disagree with your assessment that such circumstances warranted a recusal and sought the legal advice of the district's attorney, Susan Williams. During the executive session, Ms. Williams informed the entire board and Dr. Witherspoon that the law prohibits a public official from attempting to use his office to influence a governmental decision in which he or a family member has an economic interest. South Carolina Code annotated 8-13-700B. Notwithstanding Ms. Williams' confirmation that recusal is a personal choice and not required by law, in this instance, you continue to insist upon our recusal. As the conversation devolved into an argument, given the lack of legal basis to justify recusal, Chairwoman Harris ended executive session. Chairwoman Harris and I voted on the Ingenuity SC contract during open session. In response to the complaint, Ms. Williams contacted Boykin and Davis, LLC, to initiate an investigation of the allegations therein contained. By way of background, District Policy AR-BDGR authorized the district attorney to utilize the services of outside counsel on a case-by-case basis, so long as the law firm is included on the board's list of approved firms. As you know, this firm has been included on the board's list of approved law firms for years. Pursuant to Boykin and Davis' authority as the assigned outside counsel on this matter, the firm engaged a neutral investigator to conduct the investigation. As an initial matter, we found your request for an external mediator during executive session to be incompatible with the district's best interests. As you know, the board's executive session discussions are privileged to protect the district's confidential information regarding personnel matters, legal matters, and student matters, among others. However, the inclusion of a mediator in executive session would result in a waiver of that privilege. This limited the purpose of the investigation to determining the board's exposure to any future criminal investigation and addressing whether the circumstances warrant the implementation of additional security measures during board meetings. While the investigator contacted all board members, Superintendent Witherspoon, as well as Susan Williams for interviews, 2 individuals declined to participate. Additionally, you declined to interview and indicated your desire to have your complaint serve as your statement. After completing the interviews, the investigator concluded that the investigation did not result in any actionable evidence. Specifically, the investigator found that the board's exposure to a criminal investigation would be minimal, as the evidence was insufficient to substantiate your allegations. The investigator further found that there was insufficient justification to warrant the implementation of additional security measures. Given this finding, we believe that the district's established security measures are sufficient. Accordingly, this letter serves as an acknowledgement that a complaint was made by you, an investigation was conducted, and that the results of the investigation were shared with you. As our foremost concern is for safety and education of our children, our hope is to conclude this matter without further delay. Sincerely, Jamie Devine, Vice Chair, and all members of the board at that time were CC'd on this letter that went to all the board members. So I do want to put that out for the official records that this matter was investigated based off the complaint, and there was no evidence of any actionable items that was found. So I will leave that alone for right now, but I just had to bring that out because I was just disappointed that that was in the local paper. Next, Madam Chair, I do want to thank the staff and family engagement personnel for the parent pep rallies that we had, which was an excellent opportunity for our parents and community to receive information and resources for our scholars. And at the time, we enjoyed the conversation, the points and tips that we received from Mr. Aiko Koban. And so he was very informative, went to all the schools, all the high schools. And so I was pleased with what I saw in the parent participation. I would have hoped that we could do it again, Dr. Witherspoon and staff, later in the year, maybe just before Christmas or the holidays going forward. And so I appreciate those parent rallies and great information. And then lastly, about 2 weeks ago, South Carolina School Boards Association held our annual law conference, which was held in Greenville. And at that law conference, we discussed various legal and regulatory issues impacting public schools. This was an informative conference that addressed topics that school board members needed to know about. And again, this also was to increase the understanding of federal and state laws governing school boards and school districts from across the state. also to present legal changes and affecting school boards and school districts, and also to clarify legal roles and responsibilities of board members on specialized topics. And I do want to give kudos to one of our own, Susan Williams, who was a panelist in one of the discussions. She and Al Nichols and Mr. what's the young man's name? Sherrod. Sherrod was on there, and we talked a little about employee and employee grievance at the time, and so was glad to see her on the panel. Navigating the challenge of school district employment issues was her panel, and so we're glad to see that. And then we had several other breakout sessions to talk about outside legal counsel, board meetings, taking them to the next level, effective techniques for public participation, live streaming. We also talked about IDEA, which is a hot topic. Barbara Drayton from the Department of Ed came and spoke to us. And then we had our national speaker to come in to talk about cases from the national school level as well, Sarah Clark. She's Chief Legal Counsel for the Ohio State School Boards Association. And then we had Helen Grant from District 2 to talk about transgender and gender nonconforming students. As the laws have changed, we need to be current on all these terminologies and scenarios and discuss how district responds to these questions and or requests. And then lastly, last week got a chance to participate in COSBA, and COSBA is now the Consortium of State School Boards Association. And the one program that they have is called UBA, Urban Boards Alliance. I was chosen as one of the advisors, and we had our first conference, and so I was very pleased with the turnout and with the information sharing and with the networking with others from across the country, all the way from New Hampshire down to Florida, over to Texas, up to California, over to Washington State, and it was a conference where we learned a lot, and that we continue to see that what's happening here in our district is happening across the country. And so we just want to have the best knowledge and best practices as we move forward. With that, Madam Chair, I will end my report at this time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Commissioner Devine. Any other board members? Commissioner Lomanak?
Thank you, Chairwoman Harris. I've just got a couple issues I wanted to check in on with Dr. Witherspoon. One, I got a lot of calls about the change of schedule and game for the Dreer and Flora football game. There were a lot of concerns, and you and I spoke about it. And sometimes part of this is just making sure the rest of the public knows what you and I spoke about. So tell me if I'm wrong about any of this, but there was, obviously there were safety concerns after the, I think, somewhat vague threat. The district made a decision to do it Saturday morning. But ultimately, you indicated to me that it was the school's choice, that they were given the opportunity to do it anytime they wanted, and they ultimately decided they did not want to change it. Am I remembering our conversation correctly?
When we talked, and I did share information with the board at the time of the threat that was received during a JV game, that was being streamed. We did meet with, talk with certainly school staff, certainly with district staff, law enforcement, as well as district security. And there was agreement that the Friday game should be reevaluated. And that's what did occur. As I shared with you all, yes, we understand that SAT was that Saturday morning, but as I shared, that did not come up in the discussion on Friday night. It was, from a safety standpoint, let's reschedule the game. Let's do it at a time, as the league says, in what they put out. If a game has to be rescheduled and the like, try to do it as soon as possible, because there are some ramifications between the days, so many days that you have to have in between two football games. So that decision was made. When it was, I think it was that, and that communication, again, the change of the game went out via school staff, the two school staffs on that Friday evening of both additional security at both schools, just out of an abundance of caution, and also the change in the game. When we did receive, there's SAT on Saturday morning, we did, again, go back to the school administrators, hey, if what's the impact, so forth and so on, and if they wanted to do something different with the game at that time, that was up to them. And again, the decision was to keep the game as is. And as I did indicate, in terms of, again, what was known, what was not known at the time, and discussions with our security, with law enforcement and the like, that's how that played out for this particular weekend.
Well, and I think that addresses some of the concerns that were expressed to me were that parents felt like the schools hadn't been included on changing the game because it turned into, morning game was really hot and all that. But ultimately, the schools were the ones that got to decide. I mean, if they didn't want it that morning, they could have scheduled it for that night or some other time. I mean, ultimately, it was the school's decision.
Rescheduling of games generally is the school's decision. Again, to get that information out that Thursday evening to talk about things on Friday, that was done. But again, as you've indicated, ultimately, schools, if you want to change the game, you have the ability to do that.
All right, I want to switch gears to the consistent concerns that I'm getting from teachers and staff at our schools about payroll. And it's not limited to this summer. And in fact, that's part of the frustration that I'm hearing. I mean, I got an email 3 hours ago from someone who was trying to get an incentive pay from last spring. The email she received from the district said that they would get it, I think, at the end of June. She began emailing in July. She sent 5 emails. The first 4 were never responded to. She finally got a response on September 6th and was paid on September 9th. So when we often up here talk about the processes and the procedures, what I'm hearing from teachers is we email every week and we literally do not hear back. And when we get the test scores, which are obviously we've already gotten the test scores and the national scores show where we are, we're going to be begging people to be in our summer school programs. And I'm hearing over and over again, I am not signing up for this stuff anymore. I'm not doing these special incentives. I'm not doing summer school. So putting aside the wage laws that I suspect we're in violation of, it's running good teachers out of this district or out of volunteering for things that they don't have to do, but we really, really need them to do. So again, I'm going to renew my request that we immediately ask Mr. Washington to conduct a full audit of the payroll department. I do not know what the problem is. I am concerned that there's someone who's been in a position that's been open for 3 years and we haven't been able to fill it. I'm concerned that there are teachers and staff who aren't getting paid on time, or what I hear a lot of, I wasn't paid correctly, and so now I have to fill out a discrepancy form. That doesn't inspire confidence in us from our employees. So I don't know why we wouldn't at this point, given the bad publicity, given the concerns that our teachers have provided. I'm sure that you've heard from some teachers. These emails, by the way, went to the district. You've obviously gotten some emails that I was copied on as well. The stories are pretty horrific. And I don't know where the problem is, but we've got to get to the bottom of it. And we can't just blame school-level supervisors and one summer, because it's not that. Because I saw emails from the prior summer with the exact same problem. So is there any reason that we wouldn't ask Mr. Washington to prioritize an audit of the payroll department?
We have no problem with that, but I will say, and I did share information with the board a few weeks ago, and it's an organizational issue. I certainly do agree with that. But in terms of, and I'll say this term, payroll can't pay what's not in the system. So oftentimes when we do hear of a check was not deposited or whatever, and they go in and look, and it's not in the system. We did have 3 shops over this past summer that did not have any issues, that folks that were in those respective programs received their pay on time and so forth and so on. The information was in the system. That's an issue. It absolutely is. And that's unacceptable. It absolutely is. That being said, we had training, and we will do the same. And I will go far to say this, and there has been actions taken in terms of where is it? And if we find something, I did share this with you all, if it's found on the day of payroll or pay that is not in the system, then unfortunately, then the wheels start spinning as far as that goes. So, have no problem with and quite frankly, Mr. Washington and I have had conversations about this. Have no problem with that as well. But I will say again, as you've indicated, and folks have reached out to me, and we've gotten resolve. And I would continue to say that. Now, should everybody have to reach out to the superintendent? Shouldn't have to. But I would encourage anybody to do so that we can address it in a quick fashion, identify where the gaps are, and make sure that there are no gaps moving forward. So in that respect, I completely agree with you. But invariably, when we look, if it's in there, the pay is remitted. And that is something we have and we will continue to work on, and not only these folks, but others, in terms of that being done. But I can't sit here and say, okay, now if it's a payroll issue, and Ms. Matthews Hazel knows this, it's a payroll issue. But if that's somewhere else, that's somewhere else. But it does manifest itself, let me call payroll, which I understand that too. We certainly understand that. But yes, it is unacceptable. I'll say that.
Well,
I've said it to folks that have emailed or folks that called. Yes, that's unacceptable. I wholeheartedly agree.
Well, and I just think to inspire some confidence that as we head into spring and begin asking teachers to volunteer for things that we brag about every summer and say are critical, a real audit and some transparency, because the teachers and the staff, they don't care where the breakdown is. They're just sick of emailing and saying, can I please get paid? Can I please get paid the appropriate amount? And when I see somebody copy me on 5 emails that were never responded to, that's not a school level problem. They were sent to someone in the administration. They should get a response. They should get a response after the first time, because I'll tell you what, if parents email teachers, and I don't know if the district's changed this, but when I was a teacher, we had 24 hours we were expected to respond to that parent. And if we didn't, we'd get a talking to. So this is impacting our students. So I do not understand, I just don't think we should give any excuses until we've gotten Mr. Washington to do a full audit and explain to the teachers why they've had this struggle, why they've had to email, and also immediately to start responding to these emails within the same time frame that they're expected to respond to
wholeheartedly.
teachers.
But please understand, I didn't offer any excuse.
Thank you, Chairman Harris.
Commissioner King?
On that same note, Mr. Washington is an employee of the board, and the board can direct the administration to do that. We don't have to beg. This is our role. We've got to step up to the plate. I've had teachers tell me that they can't even get their mileage reimbursement done since January for conferences that they need to go to that are mandatory. We're playing with people's pocketbooks. That is unacceptable. And just the fact that an audit hasn't been conducted for the many months that we've known we've had payroll issues, that's an issue. That's an issue with your administration, Dr. Witherspoon. You're supposed to lead on this.
Ms. King, I am leading.
Where is the audit?
Okay.
Have we started?
I've just told you what the issues are, and I just said I have no problem. And Mr. Washington and I have had that conversation.
Well, I
And
don't want
he's looked
conversation.
into it.
I want actions. We are conducting an audit. It will be transparent. We will give out what the issues were and how we fix them, and this will not happen again. I don't care about conversations. I care about actions. We expect the exact same from our teachers. Now, since Mr. Devine brought it up, I did attend the conference, the SCSBA conference, and I was absolutely appalled at one presentation by White and Story. I was absolutely appalled to hear that there were lawyers that are actually probably on our lawyers list telling impressionable, probably first-time or novice school board members that in South Carolina, nothing mandates school boards to have public participations on their agenda, and it's the case. But we have it, and every school board should have it, because our doors should be open to the public for them, for us to hear their comments. And to hear that it's a privilege for the public to come and address the board is appalling. I don't want to do business with lawyers who give that kind of advice. It's appalling. No wonder people look at school boards and think that they're completely knocked off their rockers and overpowered, playing too much on their power. We need to hear from our constituents. We need to hear from our parents. Of course, there are people sometimes who come who are angry, but we can take that. We should be able to shoulder some degree of heat and criticism in our roles. We got to have some thick skin here. Now, I appreciate the Richland One School Board for always having public participation, and I sure hope that we never take it off. I heard from that same law firm that school boards, they hope that we have law enforcement at our meetings, and to also not forget that we have resources in our tool bags that we can issue no trespass notices. It was appalling. The public should be welcome. The community should be welcome. Of course, we address individual issues if there are some unruly. We've never really had these issues. We've got a great community. But to hear a law firm paid by our taxpayer dollars, when we employed it to say that, I have to go on the record. And also on the record, I called and left a message for one of the lawyers that did the presentation so that I could share those concerns, and I have received 0 phone call back. So I really want to put that on the record. Now, Ms. Harris, I need some clarification. We did receive in our packet a letter that you sent to NSBA stating that we would not be members, that we will withdraw from NSBA. May I please have from you or Mr. Devine some clarification? I know that the South Carolina School Board Association withdrew its participation or membership. I don't know how it works. Do we, as school board, do we have an individual membership to NSBA?
Let me answer that, Mr. Devine, because the letter, I had Eva send the letter. So let me explain the letter.
Okay.
Where the school board, State South Carolina School Board pulled out from NSBA, we don't have the membership with the National School Board at all. However, Eva was receiving in our office invoices from them. So she sent a letter to them to just let them know that Richland One would not, in other words, we're not paying the invoice because we're not going down that route anymore. So that's the purpose of the letter. The letter was to explain to them, they had been sending us an invoice every month.
Okay, well, thank you for clarifying.
Right.
I
That
didn't
was the
think that
purpose
we
of the
were
letter.
members.
That
Why
was the
would we
purpose of the letter.
receive invoices from them in the first place?
Well, we normally do receive that for our dues, like for the conferences and whatnot, things like that. And what they were doing, they were sending us an invoice for the year, I guess the annual dues or whatnot. And when Eva received the third one, she called me and asked me what to do. So I told her to craft me a letter, and I would sign it to let them know that Richland 1 would not be paying the invoice because we were not attending those conferences and whatnot from them again. So that's the purpose of the letter to NSBA.
Okay, well, thank you for clarifying that. I really appreciate that. Ms. Harris, one more thing for you is, last year, we did the superintendent evaluation on October the 12th. We wrapped that up. It's coming up.
That's correct.
When can we expect
Your
to?
packets will go out to you the same day that we are in our retreat, already planned.
Okay, because as you know,
And I
I'm
believe
leaving the
that's
board.
September the 24th.
Okay, so as you know, I'm leaving the board, and I would like to, I mean, it is absolutely imperative
Absolutely.
that I be, thank you, I appreciate that. And finally, Dr. Witherspoon, this question goes to you, and maybe you'll address it in your SUP report. When will we have, now that the test scores are out, when are we going to start getting those presentations?
We, last few years, we've done one presentation. There have been some of the scores, I think Pass and Ready may have been unembargoed, but the other pieces have not. So what we've done the last 3, maybe 4 years is wait until everything was unembargoed and do a single presentation. So that's the plan as we move forward.
Do we know when they're going to be unembargoed?
There's some various dates on some various releases. We can send that to you on Friday.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, are there any other board reports? Commissioner Myers and then Commissioner Clyburn.
First, I would like to state that I also attended the conference, and I think it was a very needed conference. It gave us an update on some of the state changes that will be happening. Just real brief, I want to state that, that the election is coming up in November, and politics is playing a big role in public education. That's one thing the board members need to speak about a little bit more out loud to the community for you to understand. It's important that every kid have opportunity to a fair education. Finance should not play a big role in education. Politics is now playing a big role in public education. My voice is gone. I just want to make sure I state that, Ms. Harris.
Thank you so much, Ms. Myers. Commissioner Clyburn.
Thank you so much, Ms. Harrison. Actually, that is what I was going to.
Can you use your microphone, please?
Oh. Sorry about that. Thank you so much, Chairwoman Harris. That's actually what I was going to talk about, because our election is coming up November 8th. Tuesday, November 8th is Election Day. And I just wanted to, make some statements. We'll have candidates up and down the ballot, from the governor down to school board. And I don't want to say down to, like, school board is less important, because it's one of the most important positions that an election can be held for, in my opinion. And I'm bringing it up tonight because voting is key to a functioning society. And, with that said, it should be used fully and responsibly. Voter registration needs to take place 30 days prior to Election Day. So if my calculation is right, I think that is Monday, October 10th, is the last day to register to vote. And the other thing I want to say, aside from number one, registering to vote, but number two, to be informed. Be informed about your candidates, who they are, what their background is, and if you can, what their intention is for running for office, whether it's school board, governor, Senate, Congress, whatever it is. Because one thing I have learned, in my experience throughout life or whatever, it hadn't been that long, but one thing that I've learned is not everyone is pure. Not everyone's intentions are pure. And, some people prior to, leaving an established or an organization, they want to burn down the house before they leave. So I just wanted to make that clear. And some people that are on the ballot, they may not be on the ballot for the right reasons. They may not be on the ballot for the public good or for the needs of children in our communities. So let's do our homework, find out about candidates and what their true intentions are before we go into the voting booth. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Clyburn. And I'll be real brief with my report because the hour is far spent and we haven't done the superintendent's report and look like he got pages over here. I wanted to piggyback on the conferences, the one that Commissioner Myers talked about, and just want to thank Attorney Williams for a fantastic job in your presentation. And just to hear other districts celebrate how we, as Richland 1, advocate to have some of the lowest fees set for our attorneys that we negotiate. No other district, I believe, is doing that in the state. I want to thank you for that because what it shows is your dedication and commitment to being good stewards of the taxpayers' dollars, that if you want to do business with Richland 1, we'll hire you at this amount and not a penny more. I really appreciated that. And to hear other districts talk about what we're doing in our district said a lot because whether we realize it or not, being in the capital, we are an example to our other districts. Our smaller districts, and Ms. Commissioner Devine will attest to this, they look up to us. They love to pick our brain on how we're getting through this, how we're getting through that. And it goes a long ways when you have those kind of reports given that we are being good stewards of the tax dollar side. I wanted to publicly thank you for a great job, great presentation at that law conference because as Commissioner Myers said, there were a lot of information, lots of information that was given to us in a small window of time, all day sessions, but because of commitment to what we do here, we sat there, we drank the coffee, but we took it all in and we took notes and made our way as a team to get into all of the sessions so that somebody was in those sessions from our district to get the information that we could bring it back. And then on this past weekend, I did attend the COSBA conference in Atlanta, and I just want to tell my colleague, Commissioner Devine, we were proud of him to see him as one of the folks spearheading over 28 states coming together. We heard from some of the top school districts in the country that are dealing with a lot of the same issues that we are. And I'll be honest with you, Doc, I must have sent him 61 notes of just, we got to look at this, we got to look at that. But one of the things I want to share with my colleagues that was said that I thought about all the way back on my drive from Atlanta, and that was the board has the power to shadow inequity. It's whether or not we're willing to do it. And I just thought it was powerful because those sessions did a lot of deep diving. You can't want one area of the district to prosper and succeed and the other to not, or certain areas of the district to rely solely on Title I funding and the general fund goes to another. It was just a great discussion, and it was good to hear from some of those top performing districts that you all talk about out here. I'm gonna tell you, listening to some of the things, Commissioner Devine, that they shared, their state law, their state school board of education is not as stringent as ours. There's a lot more latitude in these other states. So now when I look at our scores, we've got an oversight committee and a Department of Ed, and we're the only state that has that. So it's millions of dollars being pumped into these that could be going into our schools. And to hear folk from all across the country, you name it, Kentucky, Tennessee, Florida, Georgia, Virginia, Alabama, Mississippi, they were all there talking about how we work together to better educate our children in the public session. And I can't name all of the topics, so to my colleagues, I took it upon myself to make copies of all those notes. Y'all gonna need to print them at Richland 1 because there's a lot of paper. But I would like to share this information with you, not just about the inequality, but even about the MTSS system, Dr. Witherspoon, the health and wellness program that schools have put in place that not only deals with the mental health, but the physical health of the faculty, staff, and the student. And I'm not saying we got to go and build 10 physical fitness centers in Richland 1, but I heard them say how to use the resources that they had for faculty, for staff, for students to stay fit and healthy. It's good to know Planet Fitness lets them work out and all this other stuff, but we have kids can't get to those places. But there are things that the schools can do and the district can do, and I would like to have some more discussion about that because mental health right now is real. You see it every day, all day. Mental health issues are real, and it's no fault of the individual. You know, but we have to make sure we are providing services and support to these individuals and to learn that even physical activity helps with relieving those stresses and those anxieties that create those things. So I do want us to have some more conversation about that, Dr. Witherspoon. I don't know if we need to throw a challenge out here with a Fitbit or what, but it talked about the power of the team being a family and having each other's back. Your health matters to me. If you're not healthy, then we don't have a teacher in the classroom. The EDs are not healthy, we don't have EDs to go and check on our schools. We've got to be more supportive of our teachers, as Commissioner Lobenak talked about, and Commissioner Devine, in making sure that they get that wraparound support that we're trying to give our students. Our teachers, our faculty and staff need that as well. So I'll end my report with that, and at this time, we'll move on to the last. Commissioner Devine?
Thank you, Chairwoman Harris. I do, too, want to add and echo things that have been said, particularly regarding, I don't want to call it payroll or HR, but I do want to acknowledge that I, too, have received emails and text messages, and we all have. Mm-hmm. And so, Dr. Witherspoon, I don't know what the solution is. I don't have a solution. Let me be clear with you. I don't have a solution. But I do think, and I know we have a board retreat coming up.
It's on there.
And so you have it on the agenda?
Yes.
I want us to discuss that. What is that process? If I'm applicant A all the way till it gets to the board, what is that process? And then once we get you in, you know, kind of walk us through that pay once the person puts it on the screen, when it's kind of how that happens. I don't necessarily need granular information, but just from a high level. Just kind of tell us what that process or that flow is. If there's a flow chart.
The HR side or the payroll side, because they are different.
Yeah.
So again,
we've done the HR presentation. Dr. Long did that at the previous retreat.
Okay.
We were focusing on payroll.
Yep, payroll.
So,
okay. So payroll deals with compensating employees.
Correct.
And HR deals with employee relations. Correct? All right.
They work together.
So and they're critical and integral to the organization. But again, I'm looking forward to next year, 23, 24, to have our people on board now for next year, because if we don't have, you know, Mr. Lomax said earlier, we don't have folk ready to go really in January, as you guys are already planning for next year, then you're going to lose most of your people, and we don't need that. This is a great organization. Richland won, although I didn't graduate from here, but it's a great school district. As I travel the state and travel the country, Ms. Harris, you said it best. People pick our brains. How do y'all navigate and deal with certain things within your district?
Right.
I don't know all the answers, but we try to give some solutions. Right. But I do want to echo my voice with the employees that there are some problems.
Right.
Now, do I have all the solutions? Anybody at this table? No, but we need to continue to work together and bring something back. Now, I will say this. We need to elevate, escalate the review of maybe payroll or HR operations. That's not in the audit plan for this year. I do agree. Something needs to be done. Someone needs to affirm to us, to our employees, that this process will work better. So that is a statement. I don't necessarily need a response, but I want to add my voice because I get them same emails, and we all do, in those same texts. But something in our system isn't right, and we got to make it right. Because we need to continue with the great work that we have.
Right.
I don't think we have a recruiting issue. I think we're going to have a retention issue.
Right.
And we don't need a retention issue because we got well over 4,000 employees that are with us, been with us, but we want to make sure that we maintain and keep what we have.
Right.
All right, and I'm gonna leave that alone.
And-
Thank
and-
you,
and
thank
to-
you.
To your point, Commissioner Devine, and not so much as a response, but I do need to add my voice, and I've shared with Dr. Witherspoon, yes, I get emails and calls as well. I think one of the issues, and I think it was shared with the process, sometimes information is not being put in the system. A lot of times, and these have been questions that I've asked, because you all know my background is HR. And it's HR and payroll are two of the departments that get beat up the fastest in any organization. It's not just here in Richland 1. And a lot of times it's because people don't understand, but as I've shared with Dr. Witherspoon, all those folk want is their money. And I don't care what it takes, let's get them their money because they work for it. But I think that the scope of work, and this is just an opinion, even not knocking what Kelvin does as an internal auditor, sometimes it takes somebody that does that specific work, an HR consultant and a payroll consultant to come in and deep dive. And I've shared this with Dr. Witherspoon, to come in and look at the things that Dr. Long is doing, not knocking what Dr. Long is doing, because until you walk in a man's shoes, you don't understand. I know, and I have to be honest, since we're talking about this, there have been times I've called and said, hey, they said this didn't happen. Well, he goes and checks and says, well, Ms. Harris, the principal didn't do X, Y, Z. Or Ms. Harris, they didn't do their E-Verify. And I'm just going to be honest with you. These are the responses I've gotten. I've had payroll issues. And I said, hey, this person didn't get their pay, this, that, and other. Come to find out, not knocking my principals or throwing them under the bus. They didn't put in information like they were supposed to. So, and that's not to say I'm pointing the finger and trying to give the blame. I think there's enough blame to go around. But I think that what we need to do, and it's nothing wrong with this, it's nothing wrong with getting somebody from the outside to come in and advise you or consult you on what it is that you're doing. There's no problem with that. And I think it's a good thing. I think it's a very healthy discussion. Commissioner Lomanak brought it up. Commissioner Devine, you've talked about it. And Dr. Witherspoon will tell you, in our meetings, I talk about it all the time. But I think we're at a point where even with our internal auditor, outside eyes are always a good thing too on best practices. What can we do better? And I don't think our CFO or our director of HR would be against that. I think they would take any support they can get, because we all want to do it. And we all want our district to be better. I don't like our district having payroll issues, regardless of whose fault it is. None of us should, because the people that work for us and working in this arena is not easy. So we want to make sure that our folk are being paid. So Dr. Witherspoon, let's talk about this a little bit more. I hear my colleagues, and I express the same sentiments. We've got to do some things differently, and just look at how we become more effective in what we are doing. I do believe that with Ms. Matthew Hazel now putting that individual in place, that's the strong suit. When you put the top person in there, you can fill in those gaps. I do believe that's going to help to solve a lot of your issues. It's hard to function without payroll people. And everybody's being paid different in different ways. And even with the summer program, that was a totally different program from regular payroll. A lot of people don't understand that because they're used to getting their regular pay. But the summer school pay was set up differently. It's not a regular program. It was something different. But I think that we have enough time to put something in place that makes it flow just as smooth as a regular payroll would. I think we have enough time, and I just think we've got to put our heads together, and we've got to pull in the help that we need to take a look at what we're doing. There's nothing wrong with that.
So this will be at the next
Yes, sir.
board retreat.
Your board retreat is very long. As a matter of fact, right now, we're looking at extending your time, because there's no way possible we can get all the items in that you all have asked in those 5 or 6 hours. So it is possible.
Well, can we poll the board and do a doodle poll and say, okay, what are y'all top 3 issues so that we can discuss
that already,
that?
Commissioner Devine.
Ma'am?
We already have that. Dr. Witherspoon's folk have already been deployed, and they're working nutrition, safety, and security. These guys, but when they give their presentations, we have to allow the board the opportunity to ask questions and discussion. And even though we can plan out our retreat and say we're going to be here an hour on this subject, that may turn into the discussion that ends up being 2 hours.
Correct.
And we have to allow for the discussion. So I'm just saying I don't want any board member to feel rushed. And I don't want Dr. Witherspoon's staff to feel rushed. I want them to be able to present what we've asked of them in a suitable fashion and a reasonable amount of time, and then the floor being open for the board to ask those questions that they may have. So I'm only going to probably ask for 1 extra hour, but we'll feed you.
What time is it scheduled for?
Starts at 9.
Ends at?
I think it was set to end at 3. And now we're looking at 9 to 4. And we are looking at some things because I believe there's a home game for USC. So we're trying to keep all of this in mind of getting the board in without the big traffic congestion, and
Right.
Dr. Witherspoon's bringing 30 folk plus.
And then we
in.
can also have work sessions
Absolutely.
also just to follow up.
Right.
So, because I think all this is critical and important
Absolutely.
to the function of the organization.
Right.
It only makes us better. The more we talk, the more we understand, the more we learn, the more we work together to make it better for everybody. And it's just not just the board and superintendent team,
Right.
but this is all of
Everybody.
us working together
Right.
to make the entire system better.
We will look at it, and if there's some items on there that we can go back to whatever board member that suggested. I know everybody's interested in the security, the nutrition, the payroll stuff. Some of those others, we may be able to pull those back and maybe have you all come in an hour early for a board meeting. And then we can add those items that way if that'll work for everybody. If
Yeah,
everybody's
on a slow
good with
night.
that.
Yeah, that sounds
You
good.
like that?
On a short agenda, we've got,
Yeah.
we
If that's
happen
okay,
to have
Dr.
short
Witherspoon.
agendas sometimes.
So we'll get together and look at what you all, because you all have given me a lengthy list. So we'll go back and look at those items, what we can pull, and add them to maybe a few work sessions over the next few meetings, an hour early. Everybody's coming in, okay?
Thank you, Madam
All
Chair.
right, guys, thank you so very much. We're going to now move to our last part of our meeting on tonight, which is the Office of the Superintendent, which is 11-1. It's the superintendent's report. Dr. Witherspoon.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. Congratulations to Creighton Middle School on being named a Special Olympics Unified Champion School. And this is with a national banner recognition. This recognition means that Creighton Middle School has demonstrated a commitment to inclusion by meeting 10 national standards of excellence. Unified champion schools have inclusive school climates, and they exude a sense of collaboration, engagement, and respect for all members of the student body and staff. Creighton is one of only 4 South Carolina schools to be awarded the National Banner distinction this year. Congratulations to Principal Burns and her staff and students. And I also had an opportunity, we're going to clap for them in a minute. I had an opportunity.
Clap for 'em.
Did have an opportunity they invited me last year to a game where they, the students, I think the girls' basketball team played a game with some of our, some of the special needs students, and that really melted your heart for the students, and they helped them make shots, and student body cheered for them, and it was just wonderful. So I've gotten to see a couple of things at Creighton firsthand for what they do. And also, speaking of Creighton, congratulations to Creighton's curriculum resource teacher, Kathleen Lacey, who has been named a USA Microsoft Innovative Educator Expert for the 2022-2023 school year. Ms. Lacey is one of only 6 South Carolina educators to achieve that distinction this year. This is her 3rd consecutive year as an MIE expert, again, a Microsoft Innovative Educator Expert. This program recognizes visionaries in the field who are using technology to enhance instruction of their colleagues for improved student outcomes. We've also been notified that Richland 1 has received the 2022 Partnership District Award from the National Network of Partnership Schools at Johns Hopkins University. This is the district's 5th time being recognized for making excellent progress in strengthening the leadership of partnerships and for guiding schools to develop goal-oriented programs for family and community engagement. Congratulations again to our parent and family engagement specialists and the entire team of Office of Federal and State Programs. The team also will be recognized in the 2022 Promising Partnership Practices book for its Partnering to Enrich the Lives of Eau Claire Cluster Families initiative. Again, congratulations for that award. We also want to congratulate Columbia High School for earning a Partnership School Award. Along with the district and Columbia High, 8 other schools will be included in the Promising Partnership Practices book in recognition of the family and community engagement specialists activities. Those schools include Burton Pack, Greenview, Mill Creek, A.C. Moore Elementary Schools, Alcorn, Creighton, Hand Middle Schools, and Dreer High Schools. Congratulations to all of these schools. Richland One is teaming up with Prisma Health again this year to fight the flu in our community. Drive-through flu shot clinics will be held at various schools and other sites during October. The first one will be held Saturday, October 1st from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. here at Lower Richland High School. Free flu shots will be available to anyone 6 months old and up. Children under the age of 16 must have parental consent. The flu shots will be available on a first-come, first-served basis. The flu shot clinic schedule will be posted on our website at richland1.org. Since our last board meeting, we announced the dates of our 2023 high school graduations. The graduation ceremonies will be held May 23rd, 24th, and 25th, and the Richland One Middle College graduation will be held at the Koger Center for the Arts. All other graduations will be held at the Colonial Life Arena. Again, thank you. Again, this year, the graduation ceremonies will be live streamed on our website. The graduation schedule is posted on our website. Yesterday, September 12th, we kicked off our 2022 United Way Employee Giving Campaign. The campaign will run through September 30. Contributions made by district employees through our annual campaign help the United Way of the Midlands continue to provide vital programs, services, and resources that support members of our community, including many Richland One students and families. I encourage everyone to join me in supporting the United Way of the Midlands. Employees can contact their site campaign director for information about the campaign. And for more information about the United Way of the Midlands is available at their website, uway.org. Madam Chair, that concludes my presentation.
Thank you so much, Dr. Witherspoon. And before I open the floor, I do want to share, and I saw this in the news on yesterday, there's a Sparks program through, I believe it's the Governor's School.
Yes.
Where 3 of our schools, Bradley Elementary, Gaston Elementary, and Greenview, will be receiving some support from our Governor's School. And I'd love for you all, once you get some information, if you would share that with us.
We will.
Yeah, I know you didn't, we got so much excitement going on, I think you forgot that little piece. But if you can just share that with us at the next board meeting.
And
appreciate it.
absolutely, and one of the things that we did here was, again, as you indicated, the Governor's School put that out there, didn't let us know, but
Right.
that's okay. We'll
take
take it. But we will certainly provide additional information
Appreciate that.
for you on
We'll
that.
open the floor at this time for any questions or comments from any board member. Commissioner Devine.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Dr. Witherspoon, as it pertains to graduations, as we're going back to Colonial Life Arena,
Thank you.
Uh,
are there a limit to the number of tickets? Will there be tickets this year?
No tickets.
Only do it.
No 90-degree plus heat, humidity, and bottled waters, and all of that. But going back to, I know it has been a few years,
Right.
but there's no tickets now. They have their Colonial has their own entry and exit procedures and all of that, but no tickets.
All right, and as we look, using our fields were little to no cost to the organization. Now we will have to incur some costs for this. We've negotiated the best price yet, or are we still in negotiations for the best price?
I think
And
we're
all
still-
the districts, and let's be clear, all of the Midlands districts that use that venue typically have the same price.
Have the same price. That
Okay.
is correct.
And we're the first to graduate, is that correct as well? I
That's
believe?
our
We're still the
understanding.
first to graduate. than everybody,
In
because
this
they'll
cycle.
open up with us and close with some other districts. And then we tend to divide that number by how many ever local districts we have.
Right.
Okay, and you'll work with us again on parking?
Yes, we will have the team take a look at that.
All right, very good. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Any other questions or comments from any board member? Okay, seeing none, hearing none, we will take care of the last item on the agenda, which is the adjournment, with one announcement. The next regular board meeting of the Richland 1 Board of Commissioners will be held on Tuesday, September the 27th, 2022, at the Stevenson Administration Building at 1616 Richland Street, Columbia, South Carolina, 29201, and Attorney Williams is ready to go. Without any objection from the board,
Y'all
we're
gotta
gonna
sign.
consider ourselves adjourned, but the board needs to stick around to sign documents. Have a good night.